Greetings! Welcome to the Week 17 Early Access Update for Hot Dogs, Horseshoes, and Hand Grenades. We're going to start off, as always, with a quick sound check. Make sure your speakers aren't up too high. Wonderful. So what have we got for you this week? Well, this week was focused primarily on dealing with the long list of bugs that I have accrued over the past couple weeks and improving some systems that really needed some more work. But before we get into the details of those, we're going to show off our new toy. Basically, I noticed that this past week for the most part, folks have been playing around with the Flaregun a whole ton, which has been hilarious, especially seeing 100 flare guns being used for the modular range and fighting Clunk with the flare gun. But a number of folk have asked if there were a way to have essentially a metal high-pressure flare gun so you can actually reuse it and fire a bunch of the high-pressure shells. And so I have delivered that, along with a few improvements to the way both flare guns work. First off, instead of being able to just flip it open and shut, you can now click the left side of the touchpad to also toggle that if you are reloading quickly. Let's go ahead and pull out a shell here. Back on the touchpad to cock the hammer. Wonderful. Notice how it did not explode. Convenient. So what have we got next? We also have an improvement. Some of you may have already seen the video this week, but reloading for the AK, and just the AK for now, this will eventually come to the MP5 and the UMPs, can now be done in addition to the standard pattern where we grab with the trigger and click with the touchpad to remove a magazine. You can now do a tactical reload, which is where we take another magazine, or really any object, and basically strike the magazine release latch there with it. I tend to like to use the front. In real life, people tend to hook them, but because the Vive controller is hitting each other, I find it much easier to basically jab forward like this. I'll sort of slam that in, slam the new magazine in, ready to go. So that's how that's working. Also on the list this week, which I'm super happy with, I've finally dealt with the way that attachments work, namely making the attachment process way better. So the way this now works is that you no longer have to press an extra button to affix an attachment. You can simply place the attachment over its given rail, and it will snap to that rail. Notice how I can move it because I'm still holding the trigger down. And the moment I release the trigger, the attachment is now simply attached in that place. If I want to remove it, I still have to grab the attachment and click down on the touchpad and basically pull it away from the weapon. Because the snapping sort of is engaged the moment you do that, you can very, very quickly sort of grab an attachment, reposition it, and release it to get it exactly where you want it to be. Let me know how you think this works. There's one or two of the magnifiers act a little strange, I think, because of the distance of their sort of grab and pivot points. Let me know if you uncover any sort of unusual behavior with that. So let's see, what's next? Oh, yes. And then other modifications. Let's go ahead and spawn lock this. We have a magazine-related change and a handgun-related change. The handgun-related change is I've been playing with the recoil system to try to make it sort of the difference in recoil between, say, firing two handguns at once and firing one in a two-handed position like this matter more. And so basically, I'm just going to fire this as still as I can with one hand, and then we'll do it with two hands so you can see the difference. So here's one-handed. Note how we get a whole bunch of muzzle rise out of that. Now when I fire this with the second hand, the alternate hand has to be empty, and it has to be close to the first hand as though you were, firing two-handed like this. I'm going to fire at the same speed now. You'll notice while there's still some muzzle rise and a little bit of deviation, it's way more stable. And this is now how all the handguns work. Let me know what you think of it. And then the second thing we have is actually a new option in the options panel here under gun options. Some folk have said that one of the things that they miss about the magazine loading pattern duplication is the ability to put an empty magazine into their quick belt and get a full one out. So I'm going to pop an empty in here, spawn lock it. Now by default, this should be set to yes. You will get the sort of default loading pattern here. If this is yes, if this is set to no, just so you can actually read that, magazine duplication uses default load. If it's set to no, it will just duplicate its state. If it's set to yes, you'll always get the default load. So you can set that to whichever you prefer. All right, now that we've looked at that, we're going to jump on over to the arena scene so we can take a look at the updates that have been done to Clunk this week. All right, now that we're over in the arena, we've got a couple different changes to take a look at. The first and most important is that when you load into the scene, there aren't any clunks in it yet. There's now a quick set of buttons here over on the wall that allows you to spawn them, despawn them, as well as clean up any sort of errant magazines or rounds that are sitting around the scene. The purpose of this, as a number of people have requested, is being able to sort of do multiple rounds against the group of clunks without having to reset the scene and as such reset all of their gear and weapon and attachments and such. So we're going to go ahead and spawn those. Now, basically, Clunk is now a little bit different. I've changed his engagement behavior a little bit. He now tries to stay further away from you and tries to sort of dodge away from you when you're really, really close up to him, and does so more immediately. But he now has a pair of secondary weapons on the side, which we'll see in a moment. And then lastly, his projectiles have been slowed, but their gravity has been reduced. So they have a flatter trajectory, but you have a little more sort of time to dodge them. You'll see why this is important once I decide to fight him. I'm going to actually, I was testing something earlier. I'm going to turn my sliding locomotion back off. There we go. Warp over to here. And now let's embarrass ourselves. All right, here we go. Oh, goodness. Taking some shots to the head. Full auto. No matter what. There we can yeah, so there you can see he sort of has these machine guns on his side that fire bursts of 3 to 6 projectiles, and his main cannon now basically fires more singles and doubles instead of long extended bursts. Should have brought my cheater gun, my mag. Fetch. Oh, wow. Looks like we tagged him. I don't think I can take credit for that one. Oh, reset again. So that's enough of me doing absolutely terrible at this. Let's jump back out of VR now and go over the other changes that are coming with this week's update.
Yo! So now that we're done getting beaten up brutally by Clunk, I thought I would go over a bunch of the rest of the changelog this week, especially because there's so much stuff on it, and some of it tweaks some control stuff. So let's see. So just proceeding in no particular order here. I've toned some of the visual effects on those sort of Roman candles and fireworks and shotgun shells that fire them down a little bit, so it gets a little less cloudy and you can actually see the explosion effect better. Pump action shotguns now have a slide release button. What I mean by this is, some of you may have noticed with the pump actions, if you pump it once, cocking the hammer, and haven't fired it yet, you can't re-cock the gun again. You can't actually rack the slide. So if you wanted to, say, eject all of the rounds out of the shotgun, you can't do that at the moment. You can with this update. Basically, if you hold up on the touchpad, it will release that lock on it, so you can just rapidly rack the shotgun to your heart's content. Break action shotguns also can now be unlatched with your alternate hand by simply reaching to where the latch is and clicking with the trigger. Let's see here. I tweaked a bunch of the grip angles. The 590A1 pump is sort of moved from here back to about here because it's not a pistol grip shotgun. The grip poses on the 8 gauge and the N79 were just completely broken, so those make sense now. I've added some haptic buzz when you're ejecting or loading a magazine on the appropriate hand so you feel it more. Let's see here. Awesome. And then now other changes with Clunk. So first off, to make it, to basically reward players who are using more of an ambushy style, the reset time on Clunk's plate has been doubled out to 10 seconds. So if you damage either his track section or his turret by hitting one plate, you now have 10 seconds to hit the second one to blow him up instead of 5. I'm gonna be refactoring that entire system in terms of how him being damaged versus destroyed is going to work, but this is designed primarily as like a stopgap for now, just to make him a bit more pleasant and flexible to fight. He now properly stops moving when the death event begins. This was one of the things that I think was getting super annoying when you fought him. The nav mesh agent was not properly disengaging, so he'd be starting to explode and would, if he was close up, he would always be sliding right towards you, and it just felt silly. So that should be fixed. As I mentioned in headset, he now tries to disengage when you get close to him way more aggressively, and just his general engagement ranges have been tweaked. Let's see here. You might have noticed as well the several times that I got reset there. There's now an on-hit effect when you get hit, which is a sort of short white flash. And I've made the getting hit and being reset sounds more prominent. So that should, a lot of times if there's a lot of gunfire, you couldn't hear that reset sound at all, but now you can. So hopefully it should be a little less surprising when that happens. So yeah, so those are all the changes. Then the stuff that's in the fix log. A huge number of these are related to the closed bolt receiver system, i.e. what drives the Mark 18 and the M4 and the SMGs. And I kept getting, especially primarily for the M4 and the Mark 18, because those are bolt hold open weapons, meaning that when you fire your last shot, the bolt locks back. I still had the mechanical logic wrong for that, and there were a couple bugs in it. Like if you pulled the charging handle slightly back and released it, it would eject and chamber a new round. That's been fixed. It locks back correctly and doesn't unlock when you hit the charging handle if you still have an empty magazine in. So all the mechanical logic should be correct. I checked with a buddy who was actually holding his AR at the time and could confirm that I had the mechanical logic right. So hopefully it's finally done and correct. The M4's bolt actually goes back as far as it should now. I completely fixed the 8 gauge shotgun was broken because I changed a name on a variable and forgot to manually reconnect a reference, so that's why that was broken. Thankfully that was like a 3-minute fix. I also changed the way that the foregrips on the brake actions work. They were sort of glitching out with the physics spring, so that should work better now. A whole bunch of components that weren't animating because I had just forgotten to do them or I was just feeling lazy that day, like triggers and such now animate. Weapons no longer fire when you pick them up with the touchpad menu. The fire selector on the Mark 18 is fixed. I had to actually use some texture surgery to fix that because it was wrong on one side of the weapon. Yeah, and then just a bunch of other little assorted things involving, bolts, hammers, slides, etc. So, and the warehouse ground is now fixed. Someone let me know you could fire through it. So, When in doubt, it's always a physics layer issue. So yeah, so that's all of the fixes for this week. Hopefully by the time next week rolls around, I don't have another list of like 30 things to fix, and I can focus on new content again. So in terms of what's coming up next, what's in the pipe, I'm going to continue working on my ballistic system and getting bullet penetration working correctly. I realized from beginning to implement it here that there were a bunch of sort of like critical logical flaws from how some of the math was being done, so I have to recode more of that than I would have liked, but it's worth it because, you know, especially now that the system supports multiple ammunition types, I really want to make sure hollow points and full metal jacket and armor penetrating rounds all have the correct and interesting interactions with all of the different surfaces that they can strike. So yeah, and obviously I'm going to continue working on Clunk. I've got some more robots on the drawing board, but it's probably going to be a number of weeks before those are ready. I'm actually bringing in a 3D artist friend of mine to do a full set of them. So yeah. So anywho, I will leave you to play with the new stuff and Clunk 2 version 2.1. Let me know how everything goes, and I'll see y'all next week. Peace.